but it is if people are then going to be dissuaded from returning to school once this pandemic.
It's about that, and let me say, we don't have a real measure of learning losses, but what we can say that the socio-emotional impact, the mental health, which is a consequence of this crisis for all citizens, in terms of affecting young people, for sure will be higher.
Stefania Giannini of UNESCO. Well, that's all sounding pretty bleak, I suppose. Are there any positives to be taken at all?
Hi, I'm Akili. Let's learn together with Lesson 20.
Elephant is with his long trunk.
A moment there from Akili, a mini audio lesson. It's one of hundreds of TV and radio programs in multiple languages that are offered by Ubongo, an African ed tech company. It provides edutainment, as it's known, fun shows for kids conveying key learning points. Sesame Street was the great pioneer, I suppose, in the United States. Well, Ubongo's doing pretty much the same sort of thing for Africa, and the pandemic has placed a new urgency in streamlining this content across the continent. Nisha Ligon is its co-founder.
It's really increased. I mean, we had a large audience before, but their use of our content, the frequency of that use has really gone up. It's been really important because most of these families don't have reliable access to internet for online learning, so they have to rely on these more kind of traditional and older technologies like radio and TV to learn.
So many buses, cars, and bicycles. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So we've been really focused on getting our content out as frequently as possible with as many different show times and topics covered so that there's lots of chances for kids to be watching and learning.
In practice, how much of a substitute for regular learning does this really offer?
This is not a substitute, and we had to be really clear about that too with partners who we were working with, like ministries of education. You know, what we do, it's supplemental and it really does help. We've done a lot of research that have shown that watching our programs leads to significant learning outcomes in areas like early math skills and reading, but this is in no way a substitute for school. It helps complement what's happening in school. And during a time like this where schools have been closed, what it's been really valuable for is ensuring that kids can keep developing those foundational skills. So they're not going to keep up with the school curriculum, but they keep learning and practicing their reading, their counting, their social emotional skills.
3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Phew!
You talk about filling the gap, but I guess in Africa, I mean, we know the shortcomings of the educational provision in so many countries, right, across sub-Saharan Africa. Do you think the future, perhaps, in those very poorest developing countries really needs to be a kind of a combination of conventional face-to-face learning with this type of digital or TV or radio-based content?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it can help. If you just look at the numbers, I mean, in many countries where we work, half of the population is under the age of 18. So you have to use innovative methods to try and deliver education just because there's so many kids who need to be learning, and it's difficult for a teacher to be able to deliver all of that by themselves. Add on to that the needs of kind of 21st century skills, as we call them, and being ready to work in this really rapidly changing world. I think that there's a huge role that educational media and technology can play in supporting that learning and, again, helping to fill some of those gaps, yes, both because of COVID, but then also because there is such strain on the educational systems right now.
Nisha Ligon of Ubongo. Well, that's a strand of hope that what we've learned that all this missed education amounts to. Eric Hanushek is a fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University in California. He's been trying to calculate the economic costs of missed school for young people and for the wider economies concerned.
Well, after a year, we're estimating that the average student who is involved in the school closures is going to suffer a 6 to 9% loss in income over their lifetime, unless the schools get better. Not only are the students losing, but the countries are losing, because this is going to affect the long-run growth of countries. But actually huge. Of countries. The average country in the EU or Britain or the US is likely to have 2 to 3% lower GDP on average throughout the remainder of the century because of the closures that we've seen.
And as we've heard, it could be an even higher number for some poor countries, particularly those with longer school closures, for example, in Latin America. But against that, of course, policymakers must rank the risk of protracting the pandemic itself by all the infections that busy classrooms might bring. That's reasonable, isn't it?
This is a constant trade-off that we have to face. There are safety issues involved with reopening the schools, but there are also safety issues involved from closing. The cost of closing the schools and keeping them closed is huge. I think policymakers in different countries are reacting differently. My understanding is that right now Germany is locked in a huge debate about whether to reopen schools or not. In the U.S., teachers in Chicago just voted to strike, tries to require them to go back to teaching in the classroom. So that in the United States, there's virtually no of the cost